Okay, hey everybody. So it's Gio Will from Left Man Productions Squared, and we're back for another Man in the High Castle reaction. We'll go briefly over episode 5, which was titled Wa de Foy, I believe, or something similar to that. Basically, the title is French for Bad Faith. So it was a pretty heavy episode. They went over a lot of the episode was featuring Smith in the alternate timeline. So I guess we'll start there. So Smith's gone over to the alternate timeline for a couple days. I'm not sure what he's going over there for. Maybe just kind of see what it's like. Possibly to kind of try and decompress from the insane hell that was the previous episode. Where Himmler showed up or no, it was the previous episode, episode 4, where Himmler showed up for dinner, and at the end of it, Smith was pretty sure that Himmler knew that he was not as loyal as he had been playing himself out to be, and that they had plans to deal with him in the very near future. So I'm not sure if he went there to deal with that or to get away from that, or if he had some sort of motive, like potentially to bring Thomas back over with him or something. I don't know what he was planning, but he ends up in situations that he wasn't anticipating being in, and they're kind of shattering his ego, his ego and this idea of himself that he's built up ever since the beginning of this whole process, this whole show, even before the beginning of the show, because they have some scenes from before the show begins, back when Smith was still back before the USA had formally surrendered to Germany. They had the scenes we had seen, or at least a couple days after they dropped the A-bomb on Washington D.C., and there was a lot of implicit stuff in there that kind of speaks to the way that the American leaders and the military and the soldiers were, and I guess the population at large were thinking at the time. It's kind of hard to think about in terms of trying to put yourself in the mindset, because you have to consider that in this timeline, the show's timeline, America didn't have the ability to make an atomic weapon. They looked at it like Japan looked at, and the rest of the world looked at atomic weapons in terms of like what America was boasting about. They didn't believe that such a weapon could be made. They didn't think that it was possible. They didn't think that it existed at all. And then it was dropped on them, and they saw that it was real, it was possible, and it did happen, and it basically wiped an entire city off the map, face of the map. So what's interesting about that is that it points out some other changes in the historical process, or the history of how World War II happened in the show as opposed to reality. In reality, the only reason that America even had the ability to build an atomic bomb, was because there were scientists from Germany that defected because they didn't agree with what Hitler was doing in terms of like the non-Aryans that were part of Germany, the German population, Jewish and the other countries as well. So they defected some defected to the United States. I think some defected to the UK and came to the United States. But they were the ones that developed the atomic bomb that then was the blueprint for the Fat Man and the little Fat Boy and Little Man that were dropped on Japan in World War II. And the show's timeline, those defections never happened. So America did not have any way of building an atomic weapon. And so America was in the same place that Japan was in our timeline, in our reality, where this weapon you thought didn't exist and couldn't exist is used on you, and you have no way of counteracting it or countermanding it or preventing the other party from using it again on you. So your only choice is you only have two choices at that point. You either say, screw it, we're going to die anyway, so we're going to keep fighting, or two, you surrender. And I think probably most rational people would choose to surrender at that point, because it's not worth getting everybody killed for no reason. You can't fight back against something like an atomic weapon without another atomic weapon to deter the use of atomic weapons. That's really why I believe that nuclear weapons will never be used in war ever again. It's because of the fear of reciprocity. I think I said that right. The fear of the country you use them on using them on you in retaliation. And that's one of the reasons why some countries like Iran and North Korea want to have nuclear weapons as well, because they feel that at any point another country could drop one on them and they wouldn't have any way to prevent it. Either because they don't believe in like the UN's ability to control certain countries, like Russia or the United States, which is true to a point. Both of them have veto power on the Security Council, so they really can never be held to account for their actions through the UN. At least not under normal circumstances. I'm not sure what the process would be to strip a country of their veto power in the Security Council, or even if it could be done with one of the major nations that has that power at their disposal. So in a way, I kind of understand where they're coming from. At the same time, that's one of the problems with nuclear weapons, is that unless you have a defense mechanism against them, which do exist now but didn't back then, there's no way to protect yourself from them other than having one and threatening to use it if you have one used on you, hoping that the other party is going to say, okay, that's not going to be acceptable, so we won't use it on them. So once you put yourself in that mindset, you kind of understand why Japan surrendered and why America surrendered in the show's timeline. So once they do that, the Nazis basically start taking over and send out people that they've conscribed or they've conscripted, threatened basically, into press gang into service, to spread the word that anyone that joins them willingly will be given at least some high level kind of station within the new greater Nazi Reich that they're building in America. And those that don't, the holdouts, are going to be rounded up and either imprisoned in camps or they're going to be killed. So while they're discussing what they want to do, the other guys that were part of Smith's unit one of them says it's just a symbol, it's just a piece of cloth, doesn't mean we have to believe in it. One of the other guys turns around to him and they get into an argument about it, and then they all leave eventually. And Smith's left with Helen. They're talking about it, and Helen is the one that kind of pushes him into joining the Nazis. So I think from that, and then there's another scene later on in the episode from that time period where Smith's on guard or something at a location, and one of his friends from his unit has been captured and is pleading with him to let him go to save his life. And Smith makes this decision to not do it, to let the guy die, instead of risk getting caught and risk getting him and Helen arrested and killed for treason. And I think at that point, at that decision, Smith starts building up this persona, this ego's id around himself of what he is. He kind of throws away, or at least lies himself into throwing away the ideologies that he had before the war and adopting the Nazis' ideologies to a point. And then as the show progresses, from the seasons we've seen, that persona starts to be chipped and cracked and away, and as various things start happening, like Thomas killing himself, I think it was one of the first moments that Smith really kind of started to actually, Smith's persona about himself started to break. And everything that led up to that point. Because he was doing stuff that was illegal, in terms of what he was doing, trying to falsify medical records and killing the doctor that did the tests on Thomas, to try and save him, only to have his son kill himself because he believed in the propaganda and the brainwashing that he had gone through in terms of like genetic purity and things like that. That was the point at which Smith started to make this transition from being arrogantly arrogantly and ignorant, being ignorant about throwing away his past ideals, and that he had thrown them away and wasn't believing them anymore, and kind of lying to himself, to realizing that what he was doing was a mistake, or not really a mistake, but he had made some wrong decisions and was starting to doubt himself. And then as we go on up to this season, you kind of see that play more and more. And then when we get to this point where he goes to this other world, he starts hearing things said to him by Thomas and his wife, and seeing situations happen, and then meeting up with that guy that was part of his unit that he let die. His name is Danny, I think. Yeah. And it just kind of starts really breaking down his the kind of walls he had built up around his ideologies and whatnot, and he starts realizing that he made all these horrible decisions, and they're all coming back to bite him in the ass, emotionally and mentally. And he's starting to realize that he can't survive in this place. It's so much different from where he's from and what he's experienced, that he just cannot acclimate to it. I think at first he thought maybe he could live there or something, or maybe he could kill the Helen from that timeline and bring his Helen over and his girls over, because in this timeline his other children hadn't been born yet. Or maybe bring Thomas over to his timeline, since Thomas had been killed in his timeline. And he's realizing that that's not going to happen, because in both cases the two alternate realities are so different from each other that they're basically annihilatory to each other. So they can't really exist at the same time, just because things that have happened have been so drastically different. How he's developed as a person since the Nazis took over is antithetical to the American way of life in the alternate timeline, and vice versa. Same thing with the other way. You know, if he had brought Thomas over to our timeline, he probably has realized that Thomas would probably commit suicide eventually, because he would not be able to accept what had happened. At first, he wouldn't understand what had happened, because, you know, he'd be over in this other timeline. Nazis are all over the place. There's swastikas everywhere. But yeah, so it's really interesting to see what's going on with that. The other thing was that somebody has assigned Helen this person to surveil her, or to assist her or something. They call him a Reich, a assistant mother, something like that. I forget exactly what the terminology was, but I don't know. It could either be a positive thing or malicious. Smith could have done it before he left, or it could be Himmler's wife putting somebody to tail her and surveil her for more evidence that the Smiths are no longer loyal to the Nazis, and they can use it against them in a court to get them arrested and jailed and eventually executed or something like that. I don't really know where that's going. I suspect we're going to find out in this episode. So, with all that out of the way, let's start this episode. This episode name is All Serious Daring.
I wanted to say goodbye to Thomas before I left.
He was gone already when I got up.
I'm glad I saw you before you left. Listen, I didn't.
Ah, he joined.
I thought we were going to talk about this.
I didn't miss you anymore.
Okay. This should be interesting.
Carry your boy. No, you won't. Excuse me? Think I don't know how this ends? Dad, it's done.
It's kind of replaying that scene from earlier. What he wanted to say. I wonder if it'll like a flash to that scene from before. I didn't. That would have been a nice callback to have him flash to the scene where Thomas was being taken away by the, I forget what they're called, the Nazis that come to take him when he had decided to turn himself in for his genetic disorder. That would have been a nice callback and kind of a nice insight into what Smith was thinking at that point in time. Would have been a really nice, also kind of jarring juxtaposition of the situations. And they were obviously setting it up for that, just by the way they were staging it. But I thought it would have been better. I thought it would have been a little bit better if they had just kind of emphasized it by showing it, rather than just implying it. I could say, wait a minute. He's waiting for him on the other side here.
Chrysals thought elections were a keen idea. Why not decide the fate of America with a popularity contest? Rachel's dalliance with democracy has earned her a tailor-made straitjacket and a ticket on a bullet train bound for Crazy Town. Population 1.
Population 1. What the hell? Hawthorne Evans. That was his name.
You don't know how his mind works. He thrives on riddles and puzzles and paradoxes. Straight jacket, dalliance, Crazy Town. Bullet. Abinson wrote this.
Didn't go how you expected, huh? Well, you're not the first one to try to steal fire from the gods, John. What happened over there, John? You found him. Your boy, alive and well. My girls were never born. Something found, something lost. Did you imagine slipping away to that world for good? Of course you did. But it isn't that easy, is it?
Yeah.
Now you're caught betwixt and between. You're already living with the repercussions.
Yes, but I can fix it.
You sure about that?
I'm not going to lose my son again.
Hawthorne's messing with his mind. That's his Kido's. Okay. Is he in a safe house?
We found a partial print on the...
Ijima confession? Not better than that. Gotta have something up his sleeve in case things go way south.
I remember you, Kido Taisa. Since we first met, all those years ago in Singapore.
Admiral Inoguchi, you are facing court-martial.
Did you undertake this meeting with Equiano Hampton on your own? Or did you have allies?
Hampton.
I keep my promises. Do you keep yours? I am freer man inside this jail cell than you are out there.
Ha!
You
Sticking the
are a
knife in there.
puppet, dancing on Yamori's strings.
So is Kido putting on a show for the cameras as it
Admiral
were?
Inoguchi refuses to call witnesses on his behalf.
Or
Just admitting his
does he really
guilt.
believe
His
it?
He stands accused of colluding with the terrorist Equiano Hawthorne.
He was there on my instruction.
Kido.
compassion.
Degenerate.
That's it. I don't know what it means exactly, but I know it's bad.
Where's Mr. Phipps now? You know, most people who go to those camps, they never come back.
I'm gonna make a special cupcake just for Daddy.
Oh gosh, she's giving a swastika on it. Isn't she?
Figure it out.
And even if we put a bullet in John Smith, what will it change? There'll just be another general waiting in line to take his place.
Well, he's not just a general. He's the key.
All the girls in school are wearing German braids, but my mom won't make them for me.
I wonder if
Maybe that's because
I have a new theory about this person.
they had to.
What happened? Look, I was a victim. Okay, you'll see that I'm innocent.
Children-san,
No, I can explain to him.
your optimism is so American.
What do you mean?
Alright, Kido, it's time for you to make it so.
There was a conspiracy to murder Minister Takumi. Was there not?
Yes. Admiral Inoguchi did not kill Trade Minister Takumi.
He conspired with Tagumi's murderers.
We both know who killed the Trade Minister, and it is not the BCR.
Remember the cause you served, Taisa. Terry Court Martial sentences you to death.
We are prepared to offer you the courtesy of a firing squad. Chief Inspector, the duty and honor of rendering justice falls to you.
Oh, jeez. So now Kido's got to decide whether he wants to kill an innocent man.
Escort the prisoner to the execution yard.
So what is he gonna do?
John. この目をよく見ておけ。
山森大将、田上代表殺害容疑で逮捕する。
一馬隊
Oh shit.
大将を保留しろ。命令だ。
So that's as far as Kido would let himself be pushed.
You will not survive this, Kido.
It's fun to see how that all plays out.
This file holds the evidence that
Imperial
Captain
Princess.
Ijima was the man who shot Trade Minister Takumi. Ijima was working under the orders of General Yamori.
やはりそうでしたか。
I'm not surprised.
この占領で同じ祖国を持つ者同士が
Yes, Your Highness.
I hope for a day we no longer need to send our sons to war.
Okay.
And here comes the cupcake.
Open them.
Yeah, I know it. Swastika.
It's wonderful, thank you.
I told Mom you'd like it.
So let's see what happens with this whole thing about the assistant mother.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, of course.
Did something happen on your trip?
Listen, what can I say?
I asked them to
Okay, what's
provide someone who wasn't going to interfere with your daily life.
And tell me that you can't be reached.
Alright, my previous theory is no longer true.
I can read you, John. I know when something has happened.
Oh, yeah, Richie says he's got a squat house for us in Harlem.
The pornographer.
Judge not.
He's telling us Smith travels to the portal by train.
The old book is torturing you.
Yeah, you laugh. It's one long string of code.
By the time you crack it, this war will be over.
Oh my god.
Oh shit, that's right, you weren't here.
Huh?
Where's the Statue of Liberty?
She doesn't know.
They destroyed it. That is what they built in its place.
I've forgotten that. She wasn't around when they did that. I'm not gonna write that down, it's nothing. So, interesting episode. Some pretty heavy moments, but not as heavy as the last one. So, let's see. Smith went back to the show's timeline. And he's trying to find a way to... I don't really know what he's trying to do. Hawthorne said stuff about... he's talking to Hawthorne about mitigating consequences. So maybe he's worried about if he changes things over there, there'd be repercussions in this world, or he's trying to figure out a way to change how events are occurring over there to his advantage. I'm not sure exactly. And he wants to try and keep his son from dying, basically. Maybe he's thinking somehow he can do something over there or bring something back from over there to help deal with the Nazis in his timeline. I don't really know what his endgame is there. Hawthorne's taking an adverse and perverse pleasure in screwing with Smith's mind over it, though. That's for sure. Which is his right, because they pretty much dicked him over the worst way that is possible, making him refute his past work, and make a mockery of it. Which was that whole kind of that whole opening of the show kind of thing where Julian was watching a show he made, taking down notes about it. Turns out that he's been setting out code in that, though. The question is, has he been doing this the entire time in hopes that somebody's been watching the shows, and Juliana specifically maybe, and being able to crack the code, or is this just something he just did for that episode that he produced for the Nazis? How would he know how to do that, and when to do that, and who would be watching? And maybe he just thought in general somebody watching to be able to put the pieces together. I don't know. And that's plausible, I guess, because maybe he realized that from talking with Smith that he had been through the portal, and somehow deduced how Smith had been getting to it, how he'd gotten to it and back, somehow. Interesting stuff, though, so kind of setting up Smith to get killed by somebody. Kido's son seems to be in a safe house, maybe. There's a bunch of people in this place, and his son tries to leave, and the person that's managing it or something says he has to pay somebody. And when Kido's son leaves, the guy goes out and brings him back in and glances around to make sure nobody saw him. So I think it's like a safe house or something. I'm not sure. Or it could be like a halfway house or something too, I suppose. I don't know. What else is there? Let's see. Hampton. That was the guy's name. That was the leader of the BCR. It's Hampton. The BCR seems to be kind of falling apart without Hampton around to control things. There's a lot of infighting going on. The women, I haven't written down what their names were, so I can't remember what they are at the moment. Then comes up with this plan to destroy a pipeline that the Japanese rely on for their war with China, for an oil pipeline called the Crimson. I guess it's called the Crimson Pipeline. Plan to destroy it to try and put more pressure on the Japanese in terms of, and as a result, also kind of re-announce or to state that what the BCR or what the GPS is telling people about the BCR is not true. The GPS basically saying that the BCR is over and done with now that Hampton's been killed. Julian is trying to go after Helen to try and turn her against Smith and the Reich. It may work, it may not work. I don't know what would happen with that. I think she has the tenor of her character correct in terms of whether or not she would be susceptible to that. She would be. I just don't know if she would make that risk to at this point, because we've kind of been building up the story behind her that she's learning more and more how brainwashed one of her daughters is. Basically, her daughter is a mini Hitler almost. Not mini Hitler, but is thoroughly been brainwashed by the Reich and believes in all that crap. To the point to where she suggests that Helen should go to a re-education camp. Doesn't really know what they are or what happens there, but suggests it, and then Helen kind of tells her, well, most people don't come back from that place because they kill you there or something. Supposedly. So I'm not sure if Helen is in the right state of mind to be turned around on that kind of a thing, or not. Because of the risk to her children and to herself. Because of the way that one daughter is. So, Helen's assistant, mother, whatever her title is, her name is Martha, was assigned by Smith to watch her. I'm not entirely sure why. I think Smith thinks that Himmler's about to make a move on them. So that might be why. It might be also to kind of keep tabs on her and make sure she's not doing anything stupid. That would cast more questions on their loyalty than are already present from everything else. I thought potentially that she had been sent there by Himmler to kind of groom herself into the family and then essentially take Helen's place as the mother of the family, and then they would take Helen out or something. I don't know how that would work, or how Himmler thought that would work with Smith, unless they thought that Helen was corrupting Smith and Smith didn't have any of these ideas himself. There's a scene about children kind of talking about again how coming full circle back to where he was at the beginning of the show, where he was eating rats to survive. And then there's this whole scene between him and I want to say her name is Mitsuko, maybe, about how talking about her past and how the type of optimism that children has for how things may or may not go down is so American, because she has a story about from her childhood how she had to endure essentially being a child bride for the honor of her family and herself, as opposed to her family killing this guy that raped her, basically. And then she turns to children and says, "So don't see eating rats as a bad thing. It's proof that you're a survivor." Essentially, that kind of thing. And then we come to the trial of General Inokuchi. And Kido's made his decision. I think at first, he had thought, I'm not going to ruffle any feathers, we're just going to go through this, and the evidence will speak for itself. And then when the evidence came out and they tried to frame Inokuchi as being a conspirator in the assassination of Togome, and had like the evidence that they brought out, the falsified records and whatnot, and when Kido picked up Togome's glasses and kind of had this moment of perfect clarity and realized that he had to make a choice, and the choice was either for him to retain his honor, and I suspect that the fight that he had with the son had some impact on that, or to maintain his position of power in controlling and being the leader of the Kempeitai. So they get through the trial, get to the end. They sentence Inokuchi to death. Kido gets up and goes over to whatever I don't know what his name was now, forgetting it. Tells him basically that he knows that Inokuchi wasn't responsible for any of this, and that he knew who really did it. Then that guy kind of retorts saying, remember your place and who you're supposed to be loyal to, blah, 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 blah. Stuff he's been saying. Then, as a kind of a plot twist, they announced that Kido is going to be the one that carries out the execution of this guy, which I think shocked Kido, and once again put him in a position where he had to make this decision quicker than he wanted to. So they go out to the courtyard and everything's set up, and just before they kill him, Kido stops them, turns around, points the gun at this admiral, and arrests him for the crime that he actually committed, which was the conspiracy to kill Togome. The one guy that he tricked into confessing tries to intimidate or tries to make Kido back down. Kido shoots him just point blank, just like without a hesitation or a second thought. He just shoots and kills him. So after this, Kido takes the evidence, and I'm assuming the tape as well, a confession tape. The question is if he's made a copy or not of it. To the Imperial Princess, hands it to her, and tells her what he found and what transpired. And she says that she's shocked but not surprised, and how the occupation of the Pacific states of America, Pacific coast, East Coast, West Coast of America, has turned Japan, the Japanese, against themselves, kind of caused a fracture in their society, basically. She says she's gonna send the evidence to the Emperor, but that there will be consequences. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. I definitely think that Kido's probably going to he'll likely be stripped of his position. I don't know if that means that he will feel honor bound to commit seppuku or not, though. So let's see what happens there. Let's see. So, when Smith gets back, Helen immediately recognizes that something's different about him. Something's changed. And I thought it was interesting because Hawthorne's statement at the beginning of the episode that experiencing the alternate reality the way that Smith has changes a person, has changed him and changes people in generally. And Helen's realizes just from looking at him that something is different about him. So I thought it's just like, again, Hawthorne's statement to Smith has got to be eating away at him. I think that's like Hawthorne's only pleasure right now is just to cause Smith as much agony and consternation as possible. And Smith and Helen get into this argument about this Martha person and why she's needed, and talking about stuff like that. And then the episode kind of cuts out at that point. So interesting to see where things go in the next one. So far, I don't really know how I would rate this compared to other seasons yet. It definitely has had its moments, though. Alright, it cuts out on Juliana learning about the Nazis destroying the Statue of Liberty and replacing it with this other statue. So I'd forgotten that, too, that she wasn't around when that happened, so she didn't know. So when they're driving up to New York, she looks out and sees that this thing there in its place, and immediately is like, what the hell is going on? But yeah. So, in terms of like the other seasons, the first season was, I'd say, a 9 out of 10. The second season, I'd probably also give a 9 out of 10. The third season, I would say probably 8 out of 10. This season so far has been about a 7 or a 6 out of 10. There's been a couple things. The writing has not been quite as good. Some of the story has been a little bit kind of forced, seems a little bit forced. Some things I think are happening a little bit too fast, or happening in a way that doesn't seem quite so realistic. I can't really put a thought to that yet as an explanation until I see the rest of the rest of the season and see how they wrap it up. But I think that Himmler's putting a little, like, they're building up Smith to be this kind of person that can bring the Reich down, but that's not really true. Liam's kind of right in when he's saying to Juliana that, you know, even if you kill this guy, there's going to be someone to take his place. The East Coast of America has been Nazified, and that's just, you know, it has been. To the point to where, you know, it's like generational now. The newest generations of kids have thoroughly been brainwashed, and undoing that is going to be difficult. And the only way to undo it is to first, one, defeat the Nazis and get them out of the country. And two, though, planning that, though, because of that brainwashing of the younger generation, is going to be really hard because they've been brainwashed and taught to report things that could be a threat to the Greater Reich, including stuff that their own family members are doing. So they have to hide things completely in secret. And even if they do that, there's a chance that their kids could turn around and, like, you know, shoot them or you know, be in conflict with them, actual conflict where they're, like, making the decision to kill them, and the parents have to make the choice whether to kill the kids or not. So it's a really insidious kind of thing, this brainwashing that the Reich's done. Kind of creating this alternate reality, alternate social consciousness that in which Nazism and Nazi ideals are justified, accepted, and to be considered the normal way, normal modus operandi of the country, and that people that show signs, either implicitly or explicitly, that they don't believe in them, it's their duty to report them and have them arrested, basically, and sent to these re-education camps. Dealing with that kind of brainwashing, that level of brainwashing across an entire generation or two, is going to be difficult. I don't really know how they're going to wrap this show up, to be honest. It just feels like what they need to do has to take 2 seasons, basically. It feels like there should be another season of this show. So I'm really curious to see how they wrap this up. And if they do it in a way that makes sense. Part of me thinks that because they're rushing this show, or it feels like they're rushing it, that it's going to be a total train wreck at the end. Another part of me thinks that they're going to find this portal, they're going to take control of it, and all the main characters and actors and other associated people that we've seen throughout the show are going to escape from this world into the next one and collapse the portal on the other side so that the Nazis can't get to it anymore, and just live in our timeline in their show, in the alternate reality that is our timeline. That's what I feel like is going to happen. That is the only way that they can make this ending of the show make sense, and not just a train wreck of a mess. because there's just no way they could free the country of Nazism in the few number of episodes they have left. It would take literally an entire season of them trying to do that. If not 2 more seasons trying to do that. Unless they did a bunch of time skipping, which the show has done. So that it is potential they could do that. That would make a little more sense, make it make more sense. I think the whole them escaping into the other alternate reality and then collapsing the portal makes more sense, though. I think that might be the way they're going. We'll have to see if that prediction holds out or not. But that's going to be it for this reaction. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe or follow. Well, subscribe. I'm thinking about Twitch closings now or something anyway. Appreciate it if you subscribe. If you hit the bell icon, you'll be notified of new content on the channel. And I will see you for the next reaction.